We start episode 7 with Lucifer going to the location that Charlie posted, and I guess not being satisfied with Charlie being the most retarded person in this show, wants to take her spot on the throne of utter retardation, as he does not once find it remotely suspicious that her location is at VHQ, nor how ominous and dark the whole setup is. Adding on to Lucifer's utter retardation, he sees a X mark with a spotlight posed and without any hesitation stands immediately on this trap that couldn't be more obvious if the word trap was posted on it. And of course, a giant glass dome encases Lucifer and thus succinctly establishes Lucifer as the dumbest character in this show. And with that in mind, move this over here, carry the 2, renovate this section. Here is my updated podium of the dumbest characters in this show compared to season 1. Because the show also made Lucifer the kind of dude who need to wear a helmet to use the bathroom, also undermines Vox's overall intelligence as he once again has to rely on Lucifer being this moronic in order for this to work as well. But perhaps Hazbin Hotel has taken the Borderlands approach of making a joke at the expense of the plot, as Lucifer continues to be in utter denial that this is a trap, even with some wires clutching his limbs in place. I say denial because I don't know if that was the point of this whole affair, or the show writers really thought it was funny that Lucifer is utterly clueless that this was a trap the entire time. Vox chimes in to let Lucifer know that this is a takeover, and Lucifer initially isn't fazed by this, as he still believes Vox isn't in the know about his conditions in hell, even though Vox already called you on your bluff in episode 5, before he's suddenly distracted by Alistair's bound present here as well. Bit perplexing that this kidnap of Lucifer also required that Alistair didn't utter a peep, but maybe that's just more of his 1000 IQ approach of giving Vox all the power he could possibly obtain. Vox reminds Lucifer that he knows that he can't harm the sinners. Won't that also not make sense with what Vox uses Lucifer for later? And Lucifer assumes that some nobody told him that secret, as though he's just casual about that, until Alistair butts in to say that he's sloppy about his secrets. I get that Alistair just wants to be confrontational with Lucifer as always, but how could Lucifer infer that Angel Dust was just outside the room that the show lies to the audience about, by the way, and had a wire on him this whole time? And given that Lucifer never thought to use his power to threaten the sinners means he probably assumed they already knew that about him, other than him being as retarded as a lemming not to assert his authority. Vox disrupts this back and forth between Lucifer and Alistair to boast about how much he has control of this situation, 80% of it through no work of his own too, as Lucifer also takes this as Vox's attempt to get in the middle of some awkward three-way, stating that he's still married, at least as far as he knows. Yeah, did Lilith also leave with no rhyme or reason that he'd have reason to speculate? Does he know the conditions of how far Lilith got up to empowering those sinners those 7 years ago? Regardless of that, Lucifer attempts to free himself but finds it troublesome as Vox states that Carmine helped him construct this angelic-lined coffin for him. As though Lucifer really doesn't understand the gravity, ironic, of this situation, doesn't care or know whom Carmine is, and finds his plans utterly feeble, whatever that is. I understand that Lucifer is a shut-in, so he'd likely not know, but I feel this line does feed into a greater commentary about just how little interaction some of the characters have had with each other, that Lucifer was not at all concerned or interested into how Charlie or the hotel were able to fend off the angels, where they got these weapons that could fend off the angels, or how these were the means to fend them off in the first place. It almost seemed a formality for him that angels were dying left and right in that finale and didn't really care about the nuances of it. A concession that has fed into his utter lack of concern for himself or for his own daughter for season 2 alone. Vox states that he should be much more concerned about his state and that he can assure his death as Lucifer gets mounted up into the weapon that Vox will unveil for later. We also very awkwardly segue to our first musical for this episode, named through some kind of digital feed behind Vox, where we also get a collage of Vox's mortal life before his death. Let's tackle the song first before we tackle the story behind it. The song itself is perhaps my favorite from the season, although that's entirely down to the fact that it's some kind of EDM slash dubstep mix and not anything to do with the lyrics or how it introduces itself, as it feels like the standard affair of fourth wall break. As for the story behind the song, Vox in his mortal life was a weatherman named Vincent Whitman, whom through some kind of jealousy and envy had methodically and violently cut his way through the top, killing various reporters or entertainment hosts to ascend his climb to be the god of entertainment. This ascension stopped short, where after giving some spiel, a TV falls on his head which killed him and his loyal servants as a result of being around a pool of water, thus explaining why he has a TV for a head. This, of course, doesn't explain why having a TV for a head also allows you to hypnotize people or replicate their voices, or why a sinner like him would have these kinds of powers in the afterlife, but there's more problems with this backstory. Notably, this is the third backstory of a character in Season 2 where they have been sent to hell because of the people they killed or the abetting of a person to kill people, and if we take it that Angel was also sent to hell because he murdered his father, means that's 4 of what is the same variant of sin across these characters. Once again, this proves this show is not remotely able to tackle any other complex sin and has only definitively stated that murder, or indifference to it, in any degree is sinful, and any hope that they will tackle what it means to redeem someone will be left to the fans to headcanon. As for Vox's demeanor in his mortal life, it is then incongruent that this Vox was so demure and shy towards Alistair upon meeting him if he was so ruthless in his pursuit of fame and power as a mortal. In fact, it would make more sense that Vox would harbor resentment towards Alistair because of his need for fame and power, and can't fathom how Alistair always seems to be a cut above him. Perhaps you can logic that Vox was only pretending to be this disarmed towards Alistair so that he could strangle power out of him when he least expected, but then that wouldn't fall with him having this resentment for 70 years after the fact if he was merely trying to steal his thunder. And if Vox in his mortal life couldn't stand to share power and fame with anyone else, then why was he so keen on attempting to share it with Alistair and share it with Valentino and Velvet? We see Charlie is still attempting to call up her dad, as he too is a no-call like her mother, which compounds the utter convenience that Vox just so happened to be a few minutes ahead of her on said call. Also compounding how feckless Charlie is as a Hellborn, only sees fit to continue to call and text him despite how awful she feels about her last exchange with him. Vivienne, what are you trying to communicate to your audience, that if you have put a lot of yourself in Charlie this season, then now she sees fit only to be on her phone? Before Charlie can be just as useless as ever, the TV blares up with the important Vox Tech announcement. She and the rest of the hotel staff all cut up to see what's of import, and they are shocked to see that Angel Dust, hypnotized, has taken the stage to make this announcement on behalf of them. He merely makes the appeal that the Hazbin Hotel is a joke, as though he commands greater authority on that statement than what the Hell denizens already know, and that they, the sinners, will only find a meaningful resolution with the V's. Yep, that's about as much use as he was for Vox to hypnotize him, again, and be a prop after how much his smear campaign has already been successful against the hotel. But who the fuck knows what the overall reception of this hotel actually is at this point. Speaking of, Angel Dust stands aside so Vox can proclamate some more about what Lilith had envisioned for them while we look at this graph displayed behind him. I mean, what else can I say about the utter bonkers statistics about the nature of these purges and how many sinners they've supposedly killed that this graph doesn't already do damage to? I mean, with the graph occasionally going down by how many sinners are killed, and that they killed thousands, means that at its apex that would have been the 16% cut. So that really is a pathetic number that the Exorcist killed, that also was somehow significant, yet also not, yet also hell has an overpopulation issue? Whatever, the show also isn't remotely prepared to account for the purges despite using that as its inciting incident for both seasons. Vox continues his speech as he unveils the weapon that Carmine built for him, calling it the Might of Lilith. It's basically a doomsday laser that is using Lucifer as an auxiliary source to power it, which I guess that was also something that Carmine was fine to write off too in the midst of constructing this. Again, imagine the awkwardness of Vox trying to convince Carmine to make a trap pod for a so to speak major vice of hell. But I think if we imagine that, we also would conclude that Carmine wouldn't go through with this if the other deadly vices had something to say about it. Oh wait, I tend to forget. Despite Helluva Boss and Hazbin Hotel existing in the same universe, might as well not, with how little anything that happens in one matters to the other. Shit, the major vices are more concerned about putting to trial an imp for acting in mortal affairs rather than one of their own being used to push some sinner's own war declarations to heaven. And if the major vices really do care about what Blitz got up to with that grimoire, where the fuck was that same concern over Rosie doing that then? Fuck me for expecting these shows to have any coherency between one another, I guess. Fox demonstrates the might of Lilith by aiming it at heaven and seeping a bit of Lucifer's energy. Don't ask me what this thing is seeping out of him to prime a shot at it. Keep in mind the length of how long this thing takes to fire, as it will not be consistent with its use. Anyhow, the cannon fires and manages to be powerful enough to penetrate through that barrier conjured up in episode 2, while also paving a crevasse across, say that 10 times fast, the pearly gates and a good portion of heaven. Also, confusingly, we also get what may be some kind of return fire shot from heaven, or maybe some kind of blowback from the weapon, as a projectile from heaven torpedoes straight for the purge timer and presumably destroy that heaven embassy as well. Well, thank fucking God it got destroyed here after Charlie squandered every other opportunity to use it. Otherwise, the show may have had a major contrivance on their hands. Let's just forget that this was here and thus called attention to the fact that Charlie could have used this at any fucking point. But now we have to construct a different and more needlessly complicated means to contact heaven for later. Speaking of contact, after everyone reacts predictably to the doomsday laser, Fox is somehow able to conjure a bunch of screens of himself to issue some demands to heaven after that immediate blow. Do keep this in mind, just how easy it is that hell can contact heaven, but not the other way around for later. Fox once more emphasizes that even if heaven get the bright idea to fight them, that hell has the numbers and the thunder to defeat them, making those purges once again an empty gesture from the start if this is true, but we've already been down that dire path. Fox says that heaven has 24 hours to surrender to him, because that isn't a trope of most supervillains to do that, adding that if they don't, they'll be the ones who'll face extermination over him. Now, with Fox being this close to having heaven under his belt, does call back to focal point how he expects that he'll get to heaven, as this is not merely semantics anymore. I guess he just figures that heaven will just conjure a portal for him and his goons. But if they can do that, then hey, where was that same courtesy for Pentious? And speaking of extermination, upon him stating that they'll be next in line, we get panic from some of the winners, including some that are utterly confounded by what the exterminations even are. Are you seriously trying to suggest to me that Sarah did not tell her heaven kind that they've been doing those purges? And the show expects me to take this as them fixing the mistake of not making heaven ontologically evil? Emily isn't sure what to take of this, while we see Luke is more than happy to fulfill that request to fight, because thus far she's not put the initiative to do so herself, and most of heaven feel the same way that hell is knocking violently on their doorstep. Also, it seems the hotel feels their days are numbered with this announcement, Charlie practically hyperventilating at the prospect of a war occurring, something that should have already been a concern for them at the tail end of season 1, but whatever, while Vaggie wants to hunker down as they only defended the hotel because they came straight for them. So question, if Adam didn't say they would attack the hotel first, would the circumstances of season 1 change? Would the hotel just continue to do what they did no matter how expeditious those purges were getting? Because that's an interesting thought, that the hotel only had self-preservation on their mind first before succeeding in redemption. But whether it's Charlie or Vaggie, the thought of the show ever exploring that has left all consciousness. As for Vaggie mentioning that they only fought in self-defense, it is then interesting that episode 6 attempted to give some amount of humanity to these exorcists, yet Vaggie was completely apathetic to killing those same exorcists in season 1, even if she didn't want to. And do remind me, Vaggie spared killing Lutz when she had the chance, but had no hesitation towards killing exorcists who also got hazed like her? Didn't think Vaggie the kind of person to take inspiration from Ellie from The Last of Us 2 in regards to paving a road of bodies, but sparing the big bad at the end of it. Heaven is also unsure what to do about this, as the Heaven Council bickered towards a clearly rattled Sarah with conflicting solutions to their current dilemma. Once again, Sarah has to silence the cacophony so that she can have some peace and quiet to ruminate on this, while Lute and Emily continue to argue about what the correct course of action is. Lute also curiously says that Emily is infecting your sister with her weakness, which I'm not sure if she literally means Emily and Sarah are siblings, or the more symbolic use of the word sister in this context, seeing as I thought Sarah and Emily were mother and daughter in the broadest understanding of their dynamic. As for Abel, well, he does the fence-sitting approach to this conflict resolution because he's about as useful as a buffalo nickel. Penchas, through witnessing this, decides to go to where Sarah cooped up too, as he feels he can be of some assistance to her, as though the concept of him going to hell to present himself as undeniable proof of redemption was out of the table. Anyhow, Sarah finds the notion of him helping laughable, given the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, while Penchas only wants to be someone she can confide in instead of barking orders at. It's ironic to consider that this show has constantly shit and piss all over Sir Penchas, yet he is still the best character from throughout both seasons, and the narrative crutch of which drives the plot of both. He's like the John Walker of this show in a certain light, even if the plot does have to undermine his intelligence for its own sake at times. Sarah says that as a seraphim, she is supposed to uphold the judgment of heaven and additionally separate the righteous and wicked from it, as there wasn't supposed to be any doubt about who deserved it or not. Well, Sarah, if that is the case, then why did you stamp down on Charlie's proclamation of there being no rule in the sand as, "We know when a soul arrives"? If that's about as far as you know how mortals are judged, then why did you, in your infinite hysteria, cast the purges perchance? I don't know about you, but deciding who goes to heaven and hell purely on a dice roll would give me no assurance that it'll always roll in my favor, or that I know how it would roll to begin with. This just seems like post hoc rationalization for how the show contrives not wanting to tackle what is or isn't definitively sinful in this show, expressly made about saints and sinners. What's also confusing is that because Sir Penchas is here, has completely destroyed any confidence Sarah has about making any decision, including whether heaven should retaliate or stand down. I mean, I feel like the most obvious solution to this whole debacle is to just go after the ones motivated by Vox to attack heaven chiefly, but maybe you'd claim that would only exacerbate the hatred hell has for heaven. Okay, so what? This hatred was flimsily established due to purges that have only gone on for less than a decade, and that was purely indiscriminate as far as achieving their goal was. This time, they know exactly who to go after and exactly why, and now Sarah is unsure of herself? Where was this uncertainty about how Lute and Adam carried out the purges, especially in terms of attacking the hotel? Sarah continues to pontificate that it's contradictory for her to believe that mortals have enough innate goodness to be redeemed, yet perform an act such as this, and Penchas counters quite simply that these denizens are scared. This in turn weighs our second musical, of 3 yet again, for this episode named Live to Live, which is a duet of Penchas and Sarah in which Penchas basically explains that mortals, sinner or no, would do anything under fear to live again tomorrow, adding that Penchas uniquely wasn't afraid of death when it came to saving his friends as exposited by Sarah. Also, we get a reprise of "Starts with sorry" as a response to how those guilty shed their sin. Although at least this time Penchas does add that there's a few more steps afterward behind that process. Good, because saying sorry didn't really cut for episode 5 of season 2, now did it? As for the song, well, it just sounds like a similar cadence to Sarah's confession other than that Pinchas is singing instead of Speaker, so it's a song that goes in one ear and out the other the moment it's finished. The only thing to comment about the song is that Pinchas at one point says, "Mistakes are innate to being human and alive," which just sounds like a roundabout way to say, "I'm only human," because boy, killing puppies for a living sure was a mistake that someone could make 1,000 fucking times over, huh? Returning to V Tower with Might of Lilith poised, Vox is resting on his laurels before Velvet comes in to complain that he had undersold just how much damage the Might of Lilith would cause, although this seems purely a complaint that Velvet couldn't have exploited her social media skills over. Really, the reason that Velvet is here is to exposit to the audience that Vox still doesn't have enough support to take over Heaven. Really, what else does he need? As Vox is unconcerned about that and just wants Velvet to prep some kind of party for tomorrow. This matter about what kind of support Vox needs and this party will be important for episode 8, although it's odd that he wants to have a party for the same day of which Heaven will make its decision. I guess he just has a cosmic amount of arrogance to assume they will submit to him. Also, the schism between the V's is reaching its fever pitch as Vox is yet again caught on making this whole plan about him rather than them by Velvet, whom the former barks orders at her to bring Valentino along, even knowing how upset Valentino is with him. Once that broadcast is over, it's yet again time for Alistair to antagonize Vox, while also laying on a bit thick what his entire plan is, by saying that Vox still hasn't demonstrated that he's the strongest sinner in hell. Yeah, I'm surprised that Alistair hadn't ever considered this, but Vox could just kill him if he felt bored enough. The conditions of that deal don't state that he can't, so I guess Alistair also relied on Vox just wanting to use him as his personal stress ball. Adding on to this antagonism, Vox states that he was able to accomplish all of these things while Alistair corrects that he needed the assistance of someone in the process of each of his plans, although the capture of Lucifer also relied on Lucifer being rock stupid, also adding that he couldn't even get Charlie to admit that he's won through it all. This is also going to be important more than you'll ever know, as Alistair needs to have Charlie's presence here at this party so he would have any reason to goad Vox to do this unknowingly, but let's just say hypothetically that Charlie didn't come to his party. What is Alistair's grand plan past this point exactly? And Charlie resigning herself to Vox will also be important for his overall power in hell for episode 8 as well, and in confusing nature too. Back at Heaven again, Sarah has made her choice in the matter, while being a bit cute and subverting Lute's expectations, as she initially states to her to prepare the troops, before adding that they'll be prepared to stand by, while Lute flies gleefully away. Not sure why Sarah would deliver that line like this just to be a cheeky fuck to Lute, but whatever. What Sarah wants to do is have Emily come over to Hell as a peace ambassador, more like piece of shit ambassador, as she no longer wants Fear to dictate her decisions and that she wants to have hope that Hell can change for the better and finds Emily the best candidate in that belief. I mean, this is the same Emily that would probably find a pedophile rapist an innocent soul if this image was quite indicative of her mindset. Akbay at Ye Hazbin Hotel Vaggie has the staff mount up some defenses while there is a bit of a argument between Baxter and Cherry and Husk about this means to defend the hotel, that being literally welding a piece of metal on the front entrance. Mainly, Cherry and Husk want to rescue Angel from his predicament, whereas Baxter says that they don't have enough time to do both, and this will also foreshadow for what all three of them will get up to regarding episode 8. As for Charlie, well, you know as much as I do how worthless she is, as when she isn't having a panic attack, will take time out of her busy schedule to call up her mom for the umpteenth fucking time. She eventually gets a call, but is dismayed to find that it's Vox of all, who invites her to that party he's planning for tomorrow because of Alistair goading him to, trying to claim that they are ultimately fighting for the same thing, the betterment of the people of Hell. Well, I know that Vox is full of that. Does he know that Charlie is too? Because clearly she could give less of a shit about her hotel residence thus far, which is pretty ironic that Vox is the villainous person for being outwardly insincere, whereas Charlie is the hero for being subtly insincere. Fox also alludes that Lucifer will be there as a clue to what became of her father, something that has Charlie of two minds about going even despite Vaggy's best wishes for her not to, saying that if
there's even a 1% chance
that they can convince Hell that they should try even with all other options depleted. Except for one, that being that Emily decides to pop in unannounced to assure Charlie that Sarah is on board with their whole redemption process. Of course, Emily isn't in the know that the hotel have resigned themselves to defend upon the utter defeat at the hands of Vox, what with their reputation tarnished and the angels thusly villainized. Wonder if Charlie had a hand in that, the bitch. That words will mean nothing unless they show them something to change their minds. Emily thinks it's worth a shot to show them, saying that if Hell can do that, then surely Heaven can, implying that Heaven has no means of which to spectate, watch over, or even directly broadcast their intentions to Hell. I'm sorry, how the fuck is Heaven able to make and conjure portals wherever they feel like, yet apparently can't broadcast themselves like Hell can? How the fuck did Adam know the angel dust was the porn demon otherwise? How did Hell get in the know about the purchase without them announcing it? And why wasn't this the first thing that Emily thought to do instead of sending fucking gift baskets as their pathetic apologia? And with Charlie being the one saying that words mean nothing to them, then why does she think going to this party is going to change things? Good thing the single neuron in these characters' brains finally made a connection after all the useless, retarded shit happened, because now the show has explicitly padded its own runtime for this sake. It is also here where Baxter finally becomes useful to the plot of this show, as he explicitly knows how to hack into Voxtech's broadcasting system, because he designed it, and is more than willing to help the hotel to do so. Why? Well, according to him, someone folded his blankets just the way he liked it, as this show's way to make a joke at the expense of no character development between he and the rest of the hotel. I can't believe Hazbin Hotel actually took the Borderlands approach to this, but calling attention to your shitty character development as a joke does not excuse having shitty character development in the first place. It only puts attention to the fact that Baxter's overall significance to this show was purely to contrive a means of which for the hotel to fight back against Fox after constantly self-imploding in on themselves. Baxter does clarify that he can't make a connection from Heaven back to Hell unless someone else in Heaven of his intellect could make that connection, which segues to how Pentress will be thrown in the mix as that person to accomplish the feat. So the hotel now have a plan of which to deal with Vox that will require Charlie's hand in this, although I do find it funny that Vaggy says we now have a way for Hell to believe in Charlie's dream, given her dream has not been a concern for her up to this point. And adding on that this wasn't a concern of hers, after Vaggy gives some kind of morale support for this plan before some random hotel resident cheers Vaggy on, and this is Charlie's no bullshit reaction to this.
Yeah, Wait, who are you?
That's Rooster. He's been here the whole time.
Wow!
Reminder for the last fucking time. Charlie wanted, no, needed people to come to this hotel, and this is her reaction to seeing an actual resident at the hotel. Do I need go on how the premise of this show and Charlie's own want of that cannot and would not be meagerly entertained? To pad out the remainder of episode 7, we get our third and last musical for this show called
When I Think About the Future.
Although I like the title of Menagerie of Random Fuckwads singing for the remaining procession of episode 7, because, like with The Show Must Go On, it's a deluge of other characters singing out of pocket or awareness of one another as another concession to have dialogue dressed up as lyricism. It goes to Charlie, which goes to Vaggy, which goes to Baxter, which goes to Emily and the rest of the hotel, before jumping to Vox and Alistair having their usual banter, accentuating that Alistair really is pushing his luck, while Alistair claims that no victory will be enough for Vox. Vox quite literally threatens to slit his throat once he gets up there to heaven. I mean, why save the dramatics and do so now when you have him dead to rights? And him not doing this will also cause further rifts in the motivations of these characters come episode 8. Also, this song does the unthinkable and give Valentino of all a sympathetic light, as he feels as though Vox is kicking him and what will be Velvet to the curb, and while I do understand that these two have gone over and over about how much Vox has undermined them, why should I fucking care what Mr. Evil Rapist Mothman that the show demonized thinks or feels? It becomes so apparent which characters Vivian likes more than others when it directly correlates to their writing, even to the detriment of what her audience takes away from them. Adding on to this cavalcade of bullshit, Lucifer chimes in to remind the audience how retarded he is by wondering how he got stuck in this scary box before we cut to Lute and her inflated sense of importance to this plot, and Abel in his literally pants-shitting demeanor about what will transpire between heaven and hell. Really, the only salvageable part of this song is Sarah's part at the tail end, as it feels the only part of the song actually conveyed wholly and sincerely, especially with it being a solo performance as well. Just a bit funny that the last 4 minutes of this episode had this tacked on singing when they could have cut that to lessen the load of what episode 8 has to pile on. And that was episode 7, and despite all my hemming and hawing, is the second best episode of season 2. Which isn't really saying a lot, as episode 7 only gets away with this by being a mere appetizer before the 3-course meal of bullshit that episode 8 will serve to the audience. Episode 7 nevertheless is awful in its own ways by continuing to make characters stupid for the plot, having characters have no development as a way to joke how they don't, the incongruous nature of Heaven's means of which to contact Hell, and of Charlie being just as limp-dicked and useless as ever. So with that out of the way, let's finally put a bow on this pigeon shit excuse of a show for the final episode. Episode 8 of Season 2 is the longest episode of Hazbin Hotel from across both seasons, clocking at 37 minutes, making it just 5 minutes shorter than the shortest Wednesday episode in retrospect. Much of this length feels like an excuse to maintain the 8 episodes per season formula instead of splitting this into episode 8 and 9, and you will discover just what this time in episode 8 is utilized for. Needless to say, any amount of time given for an episode doesn't matter if you waste it like how most of this season has wasted it thus far. You may also think this episode is long because it has like 7 musicals packed into it, but in fact, this episode is the only one that has 1, although this 1 is more like 3 slapped together, as its sheer length comboed with the context of its delivery will make The Show Must Go On good by comparison. Anyhow, let's properly dissect this monstrosity. We start episode 8 with Vaggie outlining the plan while some of the other characters interject at times. To summarize, Vaggie and Charlie plan to go to the party as guests while Husk, Nifty, Cherry, and Baxter break into Voxtech. During this, Husk and Cherry will break up to go rescue Angel, while Nifty has to guard Baxter as he attempts to hack into the security systems to make a signal to Pensius, whom, upon that success, can overthrow Vox and prove that redemption is possible and that there is now a unity between heaven and hell. First of all, it's just taken as a given that the hotel staff know that Angel Dust has been hypnotized by the V's, even with them inferring that something isn't right about Angel. And of course, Charlie thinks that the power of friendship, fuck me with a soldering iron, will somehow break that compulsion. Secondly, it's also taken as a given that the only way that they can prove to hell is through this broadcast and not, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Teleport him there with Emily's help, because I guess heaven are way behind on the technology tree, yet way ahead in the mystical angelic powers tree for this to be the case. As for Vaggie specifically, she will find a way to destroy the Might of Lilith that concerns this potential war between the two realms, and of course, this plan of theirs will run into some obstacles along the way in the contrived fashion that most of this show is familiar with. Anyhow, we cut to the party where Charlie and Vaggie decide to go into some weird fit for the occasion, like pirates at a pride parade, as Vox snarkily greets them. Vox has Charlie come up to the stage as Charlie immediately presses him on the whereabouts of her father, whom the latter dodges that question and brings up Vaggie's presence here as being an angel, but he only brings it up as merely a way to get under Vaggie's skin and not at any time had uses to smear the hotel. Yeah, I didn't take it that this, so to speak, analog for a bigot would stop himself short of compromising Charlie's dream of the hotel with her relationship with Vaggie if he was so keen on getting Hell to assume that Charlie isn't on their side but Heaven's. Guess the show, again, was too safe-edgy to tackle that. Vox hopes that Charlie is here to congratulate him on his success and eventual takeover of Heaven, and the matter of if she does will be important later, as Charlie looks over and remembers that Alistair was Vox's hostage, dumbass bitch as usual, and attempts to run towards him. Vox stops Charlie short of that by using his wires to restrain her on one of his chairs, and this is an important technicality in the "don't lay your hands on Charlie" line that Alistair mentioned that we can get into when the conditions of that deal are resolved. Vox has Charlie sit her ass in between the V's, and this is annoying for them such that Valentino walks off while Velvet rears him to stay until this party is over. Weird straw to break this camel's back, but again, perhaps this is indicative of Vox's own priorities conflicting with theirs. But unfortunately, them leaving from this party does serve two purposes, so lucky that Vox, putting Charlie there, contrived it this way. While Vox leers Charlie some more, this gives us time to see how Vaggie will find a way to destroy the might of Lilith, and she attempts to get some insights through Carmine. Which, I gotta say, quite the risky maneuver given Vaggie has no way of knowing if Carmine is going to tattle to Vox what their true intentions to going to this party is, so when Vaggie is explicitly trying to get her assistance in destroying this weapon before Carmine says no, it's ironic that Vaggie then resorts to saying,
Fine. Just don't try to stop me.
You went full retard, man. Never go full retard.
As Vox continues to remind Charlie that her utter retardation is what got Season 2 to even be conceived, Emily spectates over to what the B team are getting up to. Baxter is able to effortlessly use his own credentials to get into the building. Peculiar, he still has authentication for however long he was apart from them. And through this, once more, Emily lets Penchus know to get into position through her teleport. Jesus Christ! Every single reminder that she can do this, and never uses this for Penchus, puts into greater emphasis how needlessly convoluted this plan has to be for the plot's sake. Baxter plugs his computer into some kind of panel and is able to disable every camera in the building for which they can deal with the security systems and rescue Angel. Although, through this entire excursion, Baxter neglects to mention the giant fuck-off cyber shark eyeing them from above. And apparently, this was something Baxter also created, so we can't just write this off as ignorance on his part. Fortunately, he didn't, so that this plan, yet again, would get complicated. Cherry and Husk find Angel Dust in a disheveled state. That's all this show knows what to do with him. While Baxter is frantically getting his Hackerman skills as Nifty curiously watches. Baxter does manage to succeed in the task of hacking the cameras, and Vox is immediately aware of this through his attempt to embarrass Charlie some more through it. Although Baxter did say that Vox would be made aware regardless, so this is a pass. Charlie, through this, gives the game away that she had a surprise for him, and Vox predictably calls for his butt buddies to assist, but they are noticeably absent. He takes matters into his own hands by conjuring his wires into some kind of auxiliary port to attempt to counteract Baxter's hack, but Baxter has his own counter to his counter. So Charlie has the opportunity to make her appeal to Hell, for the 1000th time, might I add, while Vox helplessly attempts to buy back control, saying that where she had failed to prove redemption, Sir Penchus succeeded with a PowerPoint presentation of the ways in which he overcame his shortcomings. Wow, so you mean to tell me that was all Charlie needed to do this whole time, instead of just winging it like she did before? And that, once again, Season 2 made Charlie the kind of person who doesn't have an inner monologue, so that this would all play out exactly the way it does? But don't worry, the retard cancer that plagues these characters has moved from Charlie onto Vaggie, who thinks just picking at the metal bits of the weapon with her spear will somehow do the trick. Hey Vaggie, there's still time for me to reconsider my placement of things, so don't push your fucking luck. Anyhow, Vaggie manages to pry one of the metal panels that allows her to get inside and discover Lucifer trapped in his dome. The conversation between the two isn't substantial and is only a slight surprise to Vaggie that Lucifer is being used to power the weapon. Wouldn't that been an inference given what it's capable of? As Vaggie continues to be perplexed as to disable the weapon. I don't know, maybe start with the fucking wires at the top of Lucifer's dome perhaps? That's a good start as any. Fox attempts to interrupt Charlie, but quite literally gets muted by Baxter, which is amusing, whom Charlie then proceeds to go on her little spiel to convince Hell that she has a proof in the pudding that she could have presented as early as episode 3 of this season, but let's not constantly remind ourselves that this is the case. It seems all is well for them to make the broadcast live, but Baxter gets stopped short by Velvet, who was warned by that cyber shark that they were undermining things, so lucky that she came in literally at the last second to stop Baxter otherwise. And in we get some more fight scenes as Nifty and Velvet duke it out, instead of Nifty and Valentino, while Baxter, I guess, tries to retrieve the connection in the commotion of them fighting. Charlie gets disrupted from her groove as Vox casually recovers his own voice with some kind of wire doohickey. Not sure why he didn't do that in the midst of him trying to speak, but whatever, as we cut back to what is up with Angel Dust. Angel Dust is pretty out of it as they try to splash some water on him, and when they notice that Charlie's broadcast is getting interrupted, they opt to carry him out of here. There is a bit of a struggle from Angel Dust, who apparently is still getting whiplash from the compulsion before Cherry snuffs him into a sack to carry him forth. This is where their plan gets cut abruptly by Valentino, whom somehow arrived apropos of even knowing they were even trying to rescue Angel Dust, as he's shocked to see them even here. So we get another fight scene of Husk and Cherry versus Valentino and one of his robot courtesans, at least as far as I can tell anyway. Yeah, a good majority of episode 8's runtime are padded with this, I guess as a correction to how season 1's fight scenes did not play out nearly as long to exhibit the tension we should be getting from them. The Sinners, through Charlie's failure to provide the proof, call her out on her bullshit again, and is here where Emily improvises on the plan to make her appearance known to them again, saying the exact thing she, Sarah, and the Heaven Council could have said in episode 5 of season 1, but wanted to be patronizing dumbasses so that episode 6, 7, and 8 could exist. Thanks, show, for reminding me that your existence is purely on borrowed time. As Emily and Charlie try to make the appeal that they are all capable of redemption if they believe in themselves, to their dismay, they discover that Vox again has taken matters into his own hands as he has, out of screen and with no fanfare, used his screens to hypnotize all the partygoers here. So, good question, if Vox could have done this whole time, then why did he need to convince them of anything? And how the hell does Vox have control of these screens if he was literally being hacked just a few moments ago? Just because Baxter couldn't connoiter the signal to Pentious? And let's also not concern ourselves with why Emily nor Charlie are being compelled this way either, unless the effectiveness of his hypnosis is directly correlated to whether you have a character name or not. We cut back to the fight scenes from the penthouse and the security room. Problems come about where Baxter opts to cheerily Nifty fighting Velvet, and Cherry is able to undermine the robot courtesan by merely smacking her on the head with a bottle. Wow, didn't know that robot courtesans were made out of fucking tinsel for that to be the case, although there is a reason why this robot is taken out of the fight so easily for later. As for Charlie and Emily, Vox effortlessly just throws Emily aside with his wires again, so much for her powers of being a seraphim, but more on that later. While he really digs into Charlie's heartstrings by saying that she is just a pale imitation of her mother and that she would look at her with disgust seeing her like this. With as much as Vox has invoked Lilith as a point of inspiration and ridicule towards Charlie, does Vox somehow know more about Lilith than Charlie does? Why would that have such an effect on Charlie unless she believes it to be true about herself? Or that she didn't know her mother as much as she thinks she does? Basically, Vox wants Charlie to finally admit that she lost and that Vox is the most powerful sinner in hell. Foreshadowing. And Charlie, of course, isn't willing to do so until Alistair finally becomes pivotal to the plot of Season 2 and cashes in on that one simple favor he made with her in episode 7 of Season 1 by having her give into Vox's whims. There's going to be much to discuss about the nature of him needing Charlie to be here to say that, but we haven't tackled every little part of this condition until it happens. Charlie does say that Vox is the strongest sinner in hell, and her, just her, merely saying that is enough that not only does Vox become godlike because his ratings are 100%, but that also brokers the deal that Alistair made with Rosie by proxy of him not being the strongest sinner anymore. So first off, Vox has made abundantly clear that he wants nothing more but to smear Charlie, the hotel, and what they stand for constantly throughout, to the point that I feel that anything Charlie says favorably about Vox would be actively detrimental to him by association. So why Charlie saying this was the tipping point is astounding, especially considering that Vox was already extremely powerful in his own way without Charlie saying this to begin with, which is also absurd that he needed her approval specifically. Secondly, the conditions of Alistair's deal with Rosie do not make any sense if Charlie merely stating something, and not believing it, are enough for it to be broken, both that Rosie would still be the most powerful sinner if she can grant people that kind of power, and that there would already exist sinners who believe Vox is stronger than Alistair at this point. Why would it work for Charlie, but not work if Zestral or Carmine said it? Thirdly, when Alistair made that deal with Charlie back in season 1, did he make it knowing that this was what he was going to use it for? Because he was utterly at a loss as to how to break his deal with Rosie up until episode 4 of season 2, so it seemed he only cashed in on that favor because it was opportune for him to. And we will have much more to discuss as to just how many pieces had to be accounted for in order for Alistair to break his deal with Rosie and cash in on that favor with Charlie once we resolve his deal with Vox. Vox in his godlike status goes to charge up the might of Lilith again, I guess so much for the 24-hour window, while Lucifer continues to remind us how we can't take him remotely seriously in the noise of Vox priming a shot of it. Back to Vox, he's thankful of Charlie succumbing to him, so congratulatory he is that he puts his hands on her shoulders and thus has broken the deal he had with Alistair. How? Well, Alistair specified not to lay his hands on Charlie, not that he couldn't hurt her. Although, Vox should have already broken this deal with him touching Charlie with his wires, unless we are to take the line literally as Vox touching her with his hands, so he could touch her with his foot or head. Also, Alistair has a lot of strong opinions about Vox touching people and how fucking creepy he is, which is odd coming from someone who couldn't give a shit about Vox for the past 70 years and didn't view him as his equal. But I forget that this isn't the mysterious and cool Alistair, but the jaded and opinionated Alistair we have now, so I guess this tracks. But what doesn't track is just how much Alistair had to track in order to break all of his contracts in the manner that they do. First off, he had to expect that the hotel wouldn't come rescue him. He would have had to expect that Vox would have thrown a party before his attack on Heaven and invite Charlie to it, although Alistair did goad him to do that. And throughout this whole entire power grab of Vox, had the hope that Vox didn't kill Charlie, even with the whole technicality nonsense, or didn't kill him while chained this way. Yes, much like with Vox only getting as far as he does because everyone is a moron, Alistair also only got to where he was because everyone is a moron in this show as well, and that the conditions of his plan specifically required Charlie of all to say that someone else was more powerful than he. Also, if that is the case now, why is Alistair now more capable to fight Vox in his godlike form? Why is the condition of this deal he made with Rosie seemingly one-sided in his favor? Wouldn't Alistair know that he's outmatched if we are to believe that Vox is now the most powerful sinner in hell? As for Charlie, well, you'd think the main protagonist would have anything to say about the realization that Alistair wanted her to say that to free him, but nope, she opts to run away from this final mano-a-mano between Vox and Alistair. Keep in mind how little Charlie is proactive in the story that is supposedly all about her and this fucking redemption process for most of episode 8. So with there being 3 fight scenes running concurrently again, I have little to say about them up until the more obvious hangups with them occur. Example being, Husk and Cherry are having some difficulties fighting Valentino, odd given Husk seemed to be holding his own against him, before Husk was reminded that Angel Dust told him Valentino has poor eyesight. Now, when they say this, I reasonably inferred that what Cherry and Husk were going to do was flank him in different directions so he couldn't keep on target of either, but what they do instead is throw a smoke bomb right at his face. And bad eyesight or no, I feel that would be fatal to anyone. Oh well, it's already hard enough to figure out what is actually fatal to a sinner slash overlord, and it's going to get more confusing the farther we dabble on episode 8. Through Cherry blinding Valentino, she and Husk are able to close the distance and seemingly have the one-up on him before Valentino calls Angel for assistance. And I guess because Angel is either coked out of his mind through whatever Valentino put in him, or that he's still being compelled by Vox, he does adhere to his wishes and stops Cherry short of shoving a bomb down Val's throat. There's a bit of a struggle session where Angel is strangling Cherry and Husk attempts to break Angel out of this compulsion and has to let go of restraining Valentino in order to save Cherry from being strangled to death. To death, I say, because the show picks and chooses when these sinners are just mortals in terms of their frailty. Angel, upon being smacked by Husk, does break out of whatever trance he was in and is shocked to see that he was strangling Cherry to death, and this too will be significant regarding his last act in Season 2. Anyhow, Valentino, now broken from the clutches, thinks he has a drop on Husk, but Husk has his own tricks as he once again hammer spaces into his hat and leaves Valentino some hot dice to send him off. I should emphasize this. Valentino literally gets blown up and falls several hundred stories from V Tower and crashes into the stage with wires affixed around him, and he's merely just winded from the whole affair. Do the characters in this show function like Looney Tunes characters in terms of what kind of damage can be dealt to them? Seeing as Valentino is out of the fight and Angel rescued, we tune back to how Vox and Alistair fight, and their fight is quite city-wide as they throw each other from building to building with reckless abandon. Also iterating on how dependent Vox is on others, he calls up his cyber shark known as Shock.Wave, although Vox calls him Shockwave, so I will too for my own sanity, to assist in fighting Alistair. I guess Vox isn't the strongest sinner in hell if he needs more assistance, unless Vox is too much of a pussy to fight his own battles? In summoning Shockwave to fight Alistair for him, Vox inadvertently gets swiped by his pet back to the main stage with the Might of Lilith catching his attention. And thus, Vox decides to use the Might of Lilith against Alistair, causing untold, unthinkable amounts of damage to the city and to the pentagram as a whole. It's a bit ironic to consider in how him doing this may, in fact, have caused more death and destruction than the purges ever could, seen as the purges have been reduced in terms of their impact, length of time, or even general effectiveness, that I wonder whether they were ever going to be a significant plot point or just get rid of once it surfaced its plot beats. For some reason, there's a screen that is capturing all this calamity, and Emily and Charlie see this and figure that they go help some sinners from being slaughtered by Vox's own selfish actions. Adding on just how naive Emily is about wanting to carry out helping these sinners, it never once crosses her mind whether the people she is saving actually deserve it or want to redeem themselves, and even the animation is slippery in this by making the sinners she saves noticeably more innocent looking than the ones we have seen. I guess you could say that's consistent with her philosophy on the sinners as a whole, and while I'm not saying she just leave these people to die on that thought, but I do wonder if that is a thought that she could have. Like, would she spare this same courtesy if Valentino was caught in the crossfire, knowing what he's done? Carmine also sees Emily doing this, again, where and why the fuck would the TV screen be capturing this, and sees Vaggie still attempting to disable the Might of Lilith like a moron would, beating his head against a brick wall. This will get Carmine to reconsider her not helping Vaggie assist in disabling the weapon, given Vaggie is disabled enough already to even try. Cutting back to the fight between Velvet and Nifty, Baxter does become useful in this fight as he uses his elite hacking skills to disable Velvet's social media powers so that Nifty can also kick her out of a window from a tall balcony. Velvet literally breaks into several body parts. This is also our only indication that she's a mannequin, and this too does not kill Velvet, but just merely put her out of the fight. Surely this couldn't happen with Vox either, even though that would be the expected outcome of this season. With Velvet out of the way, Baxter is able to refocus on making a connection and is able to, but Deus Ex Might of Lilith Beam comes in and destroys the laptop that Baxter was using. Lucky and unlucky that this said beam did not kill Baxter or Nifty or seriously wound them in the process. And am I to believe that Vox somehow knew they were trying to broadcast from that portion of the roof specifically? Because there's no way that beam was somehow intended for Alistair, and just feels like the show's way of saying, fuck it, we need to contrive any reason for the broadcast not to go live. Sarah and Penchus are also able to see this upon Baxter saying that Penchus would need to invent something that could force its way to be broadcasted into hell, instead of the frankly obvious solution of just bringing a portal his way, but you already know they're beyond addressing that. Velvet and Valentina are able to somewhat recover from their injuries as the two are seeing that Vox is becoming increasingly manic from trying to kill Alistair, and we also see that Vox is just able to shoot several beams in quick succession merely as a visual gag of the V's narrowly dodging one. Faggy is still struggling to disable the Might of Lilith, and Vox somehow isn't aware that she's doing this until Carmine comes in to assist by literally telling her to lift a panel and cut some wires. I'm really fucking close to replacing Adam with Vaggy with this in mind, but I'm a patient man. I know how utterly moronic Adam can't be. Don't let the recency bias affect my decisions. Through Vox's attempts to kill Alistair, he realized that he posted cringe online and is now losing subscriber, or in the case of this show, losing his ratings, I guess because he used the Might of Lilith so indiscriminately and that the other two V's got their shit rocked in too. So, desperate times call for desperate measures as Vox uses his own wires to plug into Lucifer to continue firing the laser, bereft of Carmine or Vaggy's own attempts to disable it. As Alistair continues to fend off Shockwave, Vox is able to laser in on Alistair and prime a shot, in which Emily attempts to save Alistair from it, but inadvertently gets one of her wings clipped from the beam as a result. Again, peculiar that Emily is so keen on saving Alistair with no forethought about what he's done or what he's going to do, unless Charlie told Emily off-screen about Alistair's association with the hotel. The only narrative aspect of this that is of any consequence is that upon seeing Emily hurt this way, breaks Sarah's resolve as she wants Abel and Luke to prepare the army. Penchus is able to steer Sarah away from all-out war as he believes in himself to make whatever is necessary, so Sarah instead opts to have Abel and Luke escort Emily to safety away from hell. Do keep in mind the time it takes for Abel and Luke to appear in hell relative to the time that they take via a portal. They must have taken the scenic route. As we cut back to where Charlie is comforting Emily in her wounds, but not Alistair in this scene. I mean, it's pretty consistent, all things considered, with how absent-minded Charlie has been about him. Just didn't think the show would agree with that sentiment, and there's more where that comes from for the remainder of this episode. With the three in close proximity of the weapon, Vox finds it a perfect opportunity to kill three birds with one stone while saying that they've been fucking cancelled. Now, I get he's a TV head, so he's talking about canceled in terms of serialization of a TV show, but I do like to think with how much this show takes from the modern day, I do sincerely believe that he means in terms of cancel culture. Talk about how much more dissonant Vox is as an analogy to modern culture. Carmine tries to stop Vox doing this by saying that,
"You idiot! If it overloads, it will blow, taking you, us, and half the pentagram with it."
And I have to ask, did Carmine design the weapon with this in mind? Why would she design a weapon that could suffer a China syndrome upon repeated use? Or was it only unstable because of them cutting a few fucking wires? I don't know about you, but her saying this really makes Carmine quite immoral that she was willing to make a weapon that could blow half of her own city because she didn't want to lose anyone else. Vox becomes quite fatalistic about how much collateral he causes, as he really exemplifies the blink if it was written by VivziePop meme, as he says fuck for every other word in the sentence to exemplify just how careless he has become. Or, all he seems to care about now is that he wants to kill Alistair in this moment, pining again how he could have done that for the entire duration he had Alistair as his personal prisoner, but opted not to because he looked up to him? I mean, where was the through line he wanted to kill Alistair between then and now? Because Alistair got him on that technicality? So, who will be the heroes to stop Vox short of overloading the weapon to get his Pyrrhic victory against Alistair? It's none other than Velvet and Valentino. And while I do get that they are doing this out of their own self-preservation and pragmatism, this also undermines our main protagonist as having any effect in undermining the main antagonist just as much as it was for when Lucifer had to chip in for Charlie to deal with Adam. But no undermining of the entire nature of this season couldn't be better exemplified than what Valentino does to Vox next.
I'm a fucking god!
And boy, is there a lot to discuss about the decision to do this purely as a fucking joke. First off, I get it. Valentino has been utterly pissed off about Vox undermining them to the point of wanting his selfish squabble with Alistair that he's not going to let him kamikaze the entire realm for it. But if Vox is a fucking god and is supposedly the most powerful sinner, how could a Valentino just casually rip his head off like this? Why would you have Vox's downfall be entirely down to making Valentino the unsung hero of the entire fucking season? Seriously, what is wrong with you, Vivienne? Why do you want us to be endeared to this pathetic piece of shit? Why did you hire a storyboard artist who fetishized rape as the prime person to write the scenes with Valentino in it? Okay. That last one was beyond irrelevant to this scene. Let's carry on. Secondly, Valentino doing this to Vox does not, in fact, kill Vox as you likely assume, because supposedly the show has plans to involve him in season 3. But how exactly? It would have been a lot more of a satisfying closer to his entire arc that he had died here because of the people he had been neglecting and undermining for his own vanity. But now just having him around feels awkward whenever he and the other Vs interact with each other for future. Like, what grand scheme could Vox plan that is somehow grander than this? Imagine if Adam just walked off those stab wounds and just decided to be a couch cushion for the entirety of season 2, just barking orders to loot. I mean, it seems even the show only half commits to his lack of presence, so it's not far off. Thirdly, this was only done because the show writers had it in their mind that it would be humorous that Valentino did this and did not care how narratively satisfying it would be or how it would conflict with the audience's own feelings about the Vs as a whole. Just like with Penchus wanting to kill himself or of making light of Valentino abusing angel dust, these writers were going to have the scene play out exactly like this and did not care how the audience take away from it, as they seem selective as to what you should actually concern yourself with. And fourthly, with Vox being defeated by his own goons and not by the protagonists, squarely puts into focus how much Vox's own impact as an antagonist was secondhand, not by his own cunning or deceit, and even in the examples given they are merely of chance, just through contrivance, stupidity, or likewise. There will be a deeper dive into his overall motivations of doing any of this come the summary, and while Vox is more compelling of a villain than Adam, he is nevertheless confused and all over the place as one. Even with Valentino having cut Vox above the collar, the might of Lilith unfortunately is still going to blow, like this show has, and Charlie wants to helplessly clear out people from the impact, although to Carmine, there isn't any time. It is here where Emily has her own moxie to do something about the weapon, and is in where that one and only musical finally chimes in, known as
You're my hope.
This song, much like with The Show Must Go On, is purely dialogue delivered through lyricism over a course of 5 straight minutes. Although this song cheats by having effectively 3 different songs jam in at times. And while The Show Must Go On also had bits like that, at least most of the time, its lyricism was divorced by what was going on. No, here, it's all taking place right here to further fourth wall break while having plenty of awful writing, character dynamics, and the most cringe-inducing scene to boot. Congrats, show, you made a song even worse than The Show Must Go On within the end of its season. So I do wonder how you'll one-up yourself for the musical for the end of season 3. So, how does that line go? The only way to tackle a musical like this is how I would tackle anything else, chronologically. Thanks, past me. So we start this deluge by Emily singing and conjuring some kind of beam from her hands, before Charlie chimes in and does the same. And a lot of other characters also join in with their beam that somehow will contain the destruction of this laser as well. What in the Care Bears friendship is magic is this malarkey? Is the age rating for this show only advisory? And am I to believe that all sinners have this friendship beam they can conjure from their hands at will, or does it only extend to the, so to speak, overlords? The people who also partake in this little friendship circle jerk will also be hilarious, and just how discordant their feelings about disabling this laser will be in terms of how the audience will feel about it, like how Angel Dust chips in to assist given what he will do afterwards. Before more tards join in on this beam ejaculation display, Lute decides she actually wants to have something to do for season 2, as she wants to finish what she started against Sarah's wishes. Bit odd she wants to do this knowing that Abel probably will tell Sarah this, and that would be an act of treason, but we wouldn't want to mislead the audience into thinking Lute would have nothing to do, now would we? I'm also a bit curious if Lute has any queries about what they are doing, what happened with Vox or the V's, or if even heaven knows that this weapon is about to go nuclear in a moment, because it would be ironic that if Lute was successful, she'd be taken out with it. Wait, what do you mean, if? Well, Vaggie and Lute have their little rematch while Abel is panicking, I guess trying to find the balance between the two, and it's also here where we get any inkling of Abel having a character dynamic, as he asks what his dad would do upon him not being his braver son. Yeah, where the fuck is Cain, Seth, or the hundreds of other kids that Adam had, if we are going by the biblical logic of this show? Or is that also something they selectively decided not to include? Abel decides to grow some balls and stop Lute from fighting Vaggie, and somehow he is able to convince Lute by literally calling her a bitch. Okay, bit reductive, he calls her a bitch while a visage of Adam gleams in the background, and in his voice too, so that those media literacy dipshits don't accuse me of lying. But nevertheless, that stops Lute from acting upon her desires to get revenge on Charlie in the hotel, simply because he was able to invoke his father upon Lute. So, would that mean that Lute would start to get obsessed with him because he put her in her place? What the hell are we supposed to take from that, Vivienne? But yes, so much for Lute's overall impact to season 2, so that was just utterly misleading to give her this grandiose song in episode 2, only for her to have a quick scuffle, then fuck right off again. So the hopes of the hotel to fend off this beam are getting dashed before Carmine and Zeshel pop in to assist as well. A bit jarring that Carmine hadn't done so already if she had a change of heart about the weapon. And in comes some more background characters to continue the friendship beam to cringe levels not once felt before. We cut to Alistair, who seems to be slinking away before Rosie appears suddenly to ask him why he isn't helping, and Alistair, like with Vox, is only selfishly interested in getting his staff repaired as a requisite to assist. Curiously, Rosie says she won't help a snake like you, he's a deer first off, as though she's grown a conscience against his double-dealing manipulative means, and Alistair basically bull-trues his way into saying that he's that willing not to unless she does. And so the next scene, we also see Rosie and Alistair assist with repaired staff in hand, and Charlie sees this and is not delighted, but in fact shocked to see them doing this. Keep this squarely into your head for how she reacts to someone else assisting. The friendship beam has been spilt forth enough that some kind of golden bubble has covered the weapon and is also making it hover above from the base of the podium. Somehow, this also doesn't take anything underneath with it too, including Lucifer for one. Valentino and Velvet, who I guess didn't leave as they wished, see this and decide to chip in as well. And while again, I get they are doing this for their own pragmatism and self-preservation, what is absolutely inexcusable is that, upon Charlie seeing them do this, she fucking smiles at them. I think Vox puts it best when he says, because holy shit, how unbelievably tone deaf it is for Charlie to have this kind of reaction upon seeing two people who have assisted in undermining her this whole time. And There were plenty of disingenuous shitheels, can you tell how angry I am, who tried to claim that the criticism of this is that Charlie shouldn't have assisted in the friendship beam upon seeing them do this, as opposed to not smiling at them. Hell, all it would take to fix this scene is invert her reaction from Velvet and Valentino to Rosie and Alistair. So I don't buy that this is a unrealistic thing they could have fucking done. And more to the point, if someone like Velvet and Valentino can take part in this and Charlie is just going to smile about it, who else could take part? And I'm just going to shamelessly rip a clip from this channel who puts it best.
If the camera pans slightly to the left, you could actually see Hitler and Epstein helping out too.
It starts with sorry.
And with the combined forces of all the worst of the worst and the dubious at best, the weapon is destroyed safely and everyone lived happily ever after and nothing bad ever happened again, because this show has exceeded my already low expectations of it ever once broaching its initial premise. I mean, even the people who took part in this charade don't even want to talk about it, so why would they even chip in if there was nothing to take from them doing it? Why also make a joke at the expense of us to get up in our feelings about that musical? Charlie exemplifies just how much this show takes from Friendship is Magic by saying that the power of friendship is strong within us, because the rapists, cannibals, and pedophiles were the real friends made along the way of this ass cancer of a show, if Charlie is to be believed. There's a quick moment where Zeshel tells Carmine that he knew she'd come to her senses, foregoing that she made a doomsday weapon that could implode half a city, and that is the last time these 2-second cameo characters will be relevant for Season 2. Curious if they'll get their 15 minutes for Season 3 as well. Also, Lucifer is able to crawl out of his dome upon the destruction of the laser, and seems pretty disheveled from whatever he was put through. Do keep in mind his condition, as it seems the creator has a vastly different interpretation of what he went through, and of Charlie's concern about it. Penches is able to create some kind of radar that allows him to broadcast to heaven and prove to Charlie that she was indeed right, that he was redeemed. How or why? Well, who gives a fuck about that, right? And if the show didn't contrive itself to make it as difficult as possible to have Penches show himself, why couldn't that been the way that Vox spun this against the hotel, given Charlie still doesn't know if anything to do with the ideals of the hotel had any bearing on his redemption? And because Penches is doing this broadcast way after the big weapon was destroyed and Vox defeated, also undermines his apparent importance to need to broadcast this in the first place as utterly redundant. Also, apparently this broadcast is through a two-way feed, as Charlie is excited to see Penches, and that makes him lose his train of thought. So excited is Charlie to see him that she neglects her father purely as a goddamn visual gag at his expense. So once more, this too was the talk of the town about just how repugnant Charlie is as a character, and of course, Vivienne couldn't help herself to run her mouth and claim that what Lucifer went through was just a little boo-boo. Well, hey Vivienne, here's a thought. If you wanted to present it as though Lucifer was inconvenienced, perhaps you animate him to look like that instead of looking like he's about ready to bleed out. Death of the author? Not even once when it comes to her. But more to the point of Charlie's utter carelessness about her father, she was concerned where he was to Vox, was trying to call him multiple times to apologize to him, and is only now seeing him in a state that would genuinely have one wonder if he's going to die, and the writers/animators chose to have her instead prioritize being excited about seeing Penches. And there's absolutely no excuse that they couldn't have it both ways. Someone bothered to even change a frame where Charlie is holding her father while excited to see Penches. So once more, you are telling us a lot more about this character by what she does do and what she doesn't do, whether you want to or not. How about this, Vivienne? Just admit you done fucked up here instead of coping. The two-way feed extends to Penchas talking to Cherry Bomb, where the two are awkwardly flirting with one another and making some small talk about heaven, while we see Sarah reunite with Emily, whom the latter seems to have gotten over her wing being burned off, but what else is new when it comes to lack of consistency? Also, the V's are just able to mosey on out of here despite them being culpable for the near destruction of the realm of hell, and how they'll even explain away their culpability is doubly retarded as well. Angel catches a glance at Valentino leaving and has to make a very, very uncomfortable decision. Cherry and Husk are curious as to where he's going, and Angel says that he has to go back to living and working for Valentino as his slave, and this is solely on the basis that as a result of the hypnosis and of him unconsciously strangling Cherry Bomb, he can't trust himself to betray them. This is extremely heartbreaking for him, and, like it or not, this is a sensible decision for him given the circumstances, no matter how much Cherry and Husk plead they can break him out of it. Although, this means that Angel Dust's entire character growth from throughout these 2 seasons has been effectively reset back to square one, and is tonally jarring with his cheery demeanor to assist him with the Doomsday Laser. Additionally, if Vox is now just his head, would his hypnosis have any more of an effect on Angel Dust that he'd be convinced to do this? Whatever. And while this sliver of good writing finds purchase here, once more Charlie manages to dash that away as she does not have anything to say about Angel Dust leaving beyond just a one-off line about how the hotel are processing his absence. Yeah, she cried about Penchas dying for a whole fucking month. Also, she apparently forgot Dazzle died too. Rip Bozo. Yet, the prime candidate to prove her redemption process, leaving her hotel, only gets a, oh no, anyway. Wonderful. I couldn't like Charlie any less than she tried. And the final montage to cap off episode 8 and season 2 is of Charlie, once again, sending a voice message to her mother as this show's barely disguised Dear Princess Celestia, to round out some other loose ends. Charlie also states that she has sent her 47 voicemails to accentuate just how desperate she's been for her approval. Approval of someone who she's telling her things she either wouldn't know or wouldn't fucking care about, but this is purely for the audience's sake at this point. So to start, Charlie says that the hotel is now bustling, again, with patrons and have come here for the right reasons now, that the war and the exterminations are off the table. Wow, good thing it's just as easy as that, and without those purges means there's only preferential reasons someone would want to go to heaven over going to hell, seeing as hell, again, does not function the way that it does. Secondly, Charlie firmly cements Vaggy's importance to this hotel as she has relinquished herself as a hotel manager and is merely a hotel counselor for future. I mean, this can only make sense with how much Charlie was a PR nightmare for the hotel, and that Charlie had been quite disinterested in the whole redemption process of this hotel, as opposed to just working through her mommy and daddy issues to prove herself once more. But again, imagine having only seen the pilot of this show and being told that Charlie would actually step down from running the fucking hotel into season 2. And we get to see Vaggy's character arc of her wanting to change her name finalized, that she has now officially changed her name from Vaggy to Vaggy. Oh, you thought she changed it? Well, you see, she removed one letter from her name because the writers of this show are so creatively bankrupt that they literally took something Helva Boss did and did better. Also, the whole reason Vaggy wanted to change her name was that Adam gave her a name that was demeaning. So her just removing a letter changes nothing of the connotation of which that name came from, as there is no meaningful difference to how it's pronounced. At least when Blitzed removed the O in his name, that it did meaningfully change how you addressed him, and that his reasons to change his name were more significant than the name was icky to me. But hey, glad we had that drama resolved in the most pathetic way imaginable so that people couldn't accuse Vivienne of not giving her female characters any depth. Thirdly, Charlie briefly mentions Alistair's return to the hotel, who only seems to be here now just to tease and annoy Lucifer. And talk about a fall from grace and importance for this show, huh? Like, what is Alistair's purpose to this hotel now, if the hotel is doing well for itself? Why is Alistair just the scrabbled remnant of a too edgy for me background character for what will be season 3? Fourthly, Charlie states that somehow, through all the bullshit the V's pulled, we're able to somehow spin what happened at that party in their favor. How? Well, they proclaim that Valentino had heroically fended off the fight between Lute and Vaggie, and had also ensured the destruction of the Might of Lilith safely, with no further questions as to his close association with Vox in all of this. And this is purely done as a way to make Valentino a central antagonist for season 3. So fuck me sideways with a rake if that season tries to make us sympathize with him some more. And I guess we just have to assume every sinner in hell believes this despite what their eyes would tell them otherwise. Guess they took the Taylor Lorenz school of journalism. Also, if Vox had died, maybe they would be able to spin this a bit more convincingly, but with him just being around, again removes any suspension of disbelief that someone wouldn't point out the glaringly obvious. We also track back to Charlie being only somewhat concerned about Angel Dust leaving, and get a montage of the relationship Heaven has with the hotel. And despite Charlie saying that panic among the winners subsided quickly, you can clearly see plenty of these winners who do not look enthused upon this working relationship. And all this bullshit I forgot myself, but a lot of these saints would be victims of the would-be sinners that Charlie is trying to redeem. Would they not? Has there ever been a conversation about the complication that would bring? Or was that something Charlie has to discover into season 3, like she discovered that, oh, maybe a sinner should do the opposite of what they sinned for? As for Heaven as an entire concept, with Vox having wanted to go there and take it for himself, why? It doesn't seem Heaven is as peachy keen as it claims, or does it seem objectively better a place to go than Hell? At least in Hell, you can literally say, do, and act upon any impulse you feel like, with basically no repercussions, whereas in Heaven, even with the bare minimum rules they've applied, you have to go through a stringent process based on some ethereal deity whom has another entity only speak on behalf of them. I don't see the value that Heaven poses that Vox would want to take over it, not even for the pragmatic reasons of them trying to eliminate Hell. So when Charlie says that in Heaven it's quick to forgive when you live in paradise, I don't see anything about this place being one. Finally, Charlie is just happy to see how well things are going, but does wonder if what Vox said about her mother's dream differed from her interpretation of it. Who knows how much Lilith informed Charlie about what she had planned to do all the way back at that monologue for this to be something conflicting for Charlie, but regardless, Charlie again just wants her mother to be here to see the progress that she's made and hopes that she's proud of her. And the cliffhanger of season 2 for season 3 that surely won't get undermined is that Lilith does in fact call Charlie. I'm not going to run my mouth as to speculations about why Lilith decided to call Charlie now, because it doesn't service me shit when I did that for the cliffhanger from season 1. So with that, that is the end of episode 8 and season 2, and despite how long and winded I've gone on shitting on this episode, it is still only the third worst in the season. Of course, most ending episodes of a season get high marks and awful because of just everything they had to frantically round out from the prior episodes, and episode 8 does that in spades. Alistair's frankly convoluted deal making, the conditions of those deals being flimsy, the cringe-inducing way in which the weapon is dealt with, on top of the disappointing way that Vox is undermined, Charlie being a cunt as per usual, and its length also doesn't do it any favors. So with all that finally done and dusted, let's summarize. And that, fellow hotel residents, is the entirety of Hazbin Hotel Season 2. Let's just get this out of the way, Season 2 is worse than Season 1, Purely that Season 2's plot is relying on all of its characters being stupid in order for the season to play out exactly as it does. While Season 1 had its moments where characters were stupid for the plot, Season 2 takes that in spades. Whether that be how our main protagonist constantly trips on a landmine placed by the antagonist, or how the main antagonist himself is dependent upon the stupidity of the other characters to get as far as he does. This may be fine if there was any acknowledgement that these characters are acting, well, out of character, but because Season 2 needs them to behave this way, it cannot meaningfully tackle it, or else the veil would be lifted from the collective audience's eyes. The only things I can say are objective improvements on Season 2 is the animation and of the motivations of our central antagonist over Season 1, but that is small potatoes over just how much got lost as a result. As for the setting and premise of this show, Season 2 has once again bludgeoned much of its world building into inanity. The Purges, what little we do understand of them, have been simultaneously lessened in terms of their length of time, effectiveness, or rationale to be carried out, yet we are supposed to take at face value that Hell has built up a resentment for them in contrast to how long Hell was able to function as an absolute anarchy before then. Or better yet, how these purges, depending on when it's convenient for the plot, either killed so many sinners that there is threat of them being wiped out, but also that Hell somehow still has a numbers game over Heaven to mount an offensive on them. As for the dynamic between Heaven and Hell, knowing that these purges have gone on for barely a decade makes Hell seemingly a paradise for the worst of the worst, and also Heaven complicit in this depravity, if sinners can commune into mortal affairs with no apparent limit to what these Hellkind can grant, and no repercussion, especially with Heaven only having carried out these exterminations out of their own self-preservation, less than a means to put into place checks and balances for those sinners. It then compounds the conflict between Heaven and Hell that its Hell denizens would feel galvanized to take over Heaven, especially through Vox, who would know better than most that the foundation of this hatred is shaky at best. Sure, you could say that he is lying about this, but seemingly he has a drive and motivation to take over Heaven because of their ability to fight back, meaning that he was otherwise content with the newfound purges given how lackadaisical he was from throughout Season 1. But we can elaborate a bit more on him specifically as a villain, as I'm still just summarizing the premise. Season 2 also expects you to take it at face value that Serpentis cannot teleport to Hell from Heaven with little more than a curt line from Emily, and this as a result constantly folds under enough pressure from the narrative that also allots most of Season 2 to play out, as it does when Charlie assumes her own process redeemed Penchus, how the Heaven Council aren't ever inclined to bring him along as proof positive of their changed ways to Hell, or the entire construction of that broadcast between Heaven and Hell. Heaven, too, also suffers in terms of what available means they have, as they can teleport between realms willy-nilly, yet don't have what is basically a two-way satellite, and once more, this is merely a contrivance to further the plot in this direction. The best way that I can describe the way that Hazbin Hotel has strayed far, far away from an initially interesting premise is, ironically enough, an analog of the Purge movies. You had a movie that hinged on a very interesting premise. For one day out of the year, all crime is legal. There was a lot of potential in that concept about how a society functions, or even can function, around criminality being legal for that single day, and you had a lot of potential commentary about the nature of mankind, that we are prone to opportunism and depravity of this level, such that a thing like this could be normalized. Alas, what the Purge movies became was little more than a drama thriller where only murder is the diet of those who take part in this purge, as though the concept of crime being legal for one day was merely a vehicle to drive the thriller aspect of the movies home. Much in the same way that Hazbin Hotel has trivialized the aspect of redemption, that too was merely a vehicle to drive the conflict between Heaven and Hell, where the only modicum of tackling redemption was through merely murder or abetting murder. Even that aspect felt completely secondary to how Season 2 in particular propelled itself, with how absent-minded Charlie of all was about the very patrons at her hotel, how Husk would berate those seeking some kind of growth within themselves, or of Alistair's importance to this hotel being reduced to nothing. You don't hear many people talk about the Purge movies, positively or otherwise, so expect that Hazbin Hotel will suffer a similar fate once its clock has ran dry. It wouldn't be a summary about Hazbin Hotel Season 2 if I didn't talk about the meta surrounding it, along with the criticisms and attempts at a defense for it. Seeing as I've gone at length and inserted a few pricks come Vivienne's way, it was going to be inevitable that this was going to be something I would have to address for those still inclined to defend the show. First and foremost, people really want to lean on the notion that criticizing how the creator of this show conducts herself or the show itself is bigoted merely on the aspect that Vivienne is a queer Latina woman, according to some. In all my wailing about Vivienne throughout this excursion, I have not once brought up her race, sexuality, or gender in a negative light. I only bring up Vivienne as a woman descriptively, and the only time that I go at her personally is in regards to speculation that she has daddy issues or her fascination with yaoi slop, both things you can reasonably infer from the way she's made both shows. It's honestly quite dissonant that these people, who would not want you to judge someone for their inalienable characteristics, immediately jump at the opportunity to claim someone else must be. It kind of makes one wonder if they are the real bigots here and not me. Let's make this clear. Vivienne being a queer Latina woman doesn't make her suddenly immune to criticism. It doesn't mean that you also get to conflate criticism with harassment, and trying to imply it does means that anyone else could also deflect with whatever characteristics they happen to have. Would it be fair if I were to start saying that me being autistic means that everyone who criticizes me is only because of that? Of course not. And the same could be said for anyone else for that matter. Getting on the topic of bigotry and how fast and loose people play with it comes with the other criticism that people just simply can't handle how Vivienne or Spindlehorse write their female characters. That would first require that they write them with any depth, which if this analysis is anything to go by, they don't. But seeing the writing on the wall and putting attention on that can also label you as a rampant misogynist over those who decided to write their female characters with all the depth of Plank, which is an insult to him. What am I to see of Vaggie wanting to remove a singular letter from her name, but little more than getting fed leftover table scraps of Blitz's character dynamic? Is there really anything deeper to come about Charlie's anxieties other than being an uncomfortable parallel with the creator's own? What person could try to convince me there is anything deeper with Cherry Bomb, Nifty, or Velvet that isn't propelled by their male counterparts? And let me be crystal clear, me putting emphasis on how poorly and how little this show writes their female characters is not me insisting that this show follow the Bechdel test. But Vivienne surely loves to convince you that this show is female-centric when it's anything but. This is the same person who only now wants to give an episode dedicated to Millie in the third fucking season of Hell of a Boss, and I expect that when Lilith finally makes an appearance in this show, that she too will have as much depth as the rest of the female cast. Another of the premier defenses against criticism of Hazbin Hotel Season 2 is that the soundtrack for this season has presumably been one of the most played on Spotify. Beyond how this argument is already riding on the back of the argument of popularity fallacy, I want to elaborate how this defense for the show is stupid. To start, having a soundtrack, good or otherwise, does not by extension make a show good. If that were the case, then Tron Ares would have been more well received based on its soundtrack, even if it does get overbearing at times, and not been left to the proverbial wayside. Moreover, Hazbin Hotel, for as much as it leans on its musicals, is not defined by them. It's ultimately something that Vivienne force feeds into this show because she loves Broadway so much. More to the point, if the musicals are the thing that make Hazbin Hotel good, then by extension, what is said in those musicals would amount to something, and little, if any, really strike me as memorable or even worthwhile. Some of the musicals, like Gravity or Piss, a love song, bear little relevance to the whole of the show. If the musicals are surrounded by awful writing, then how can the musicals hold up then? But let's humor for a moment that Hazbin Hotel has a popular soundtrack, and somehow that means all criticism is null and void. Why haven't I heard a single song from this show on the radio then? You might think that is reductive given most of the songs aren't made for radio, save for Gravity and or Brighter, but if this show takes so much headspace in people's playlists, then surely that would apply to mainstream stations. There was a movie on Netflix called K-Pop Demon Hunters, which had a song called Golden by Huntrix, or Hunter/X, that became a mainstream bop. This is impressive both that this movie was relegated to Netflix and the song itself is relegated to K-pop, a genre that is growing popularity but is still only mainstream in South Korea to have managed this kind of airplay. If that could accomplish it, what is Hazbin Hotel's excuse? For fuck's sake, Wednesday Season 2 had a song that got airwaves through Lady Gaga's Dead Dance, and that show might as well not exist with how little people talk about it, but Hazbin Hotel can't, despite this supposed popularity? Now, for those Hazbin Hotel fans who managed to stick around for this long into the video, perhaps out of sheer indignance of me, likely have taken much of the awful things I say about this show and them as gospel or heresy. Something I want to make perfectly clear about all of this. There is no one on God's green earth that can hurt Hazbin Hotel or the fandom quite like Vivian Medrano can. You can call me a bigot, you can call me a retard, you can say I lack media literacy, hell, you can call me a liar and a grifter. But what I do here is pennies compared to the financial ruin that Vivian can befell upon Hazbin Hotel. She's a walking PR nightmare with every utterance, whether that's on Blue Sky or in live interviews. She can make crack ships and she can unmake them with the stroke of the hand, and she is ultimately responsible for how much people take away from her shows. It would most certainly stroke my ego to believe that my analysis series could sway any amount of direction the show is heading towards, but I would be lying to myself for that to be the case. So when you get mad at the things that I say, call me a hypocrite or hater, or whatever you think warrants a discretion, keep in mind who really holds the cards here, and ponder whether your priorities are misplaced. And perhaps it's not merely me who you should concern yourself with, as there is a growing discontent amongst those watching this show that some have gone back around to give Steven Universe of all due credit in relation to this. You can even see how much people want to draw blood out of this stone of a show, that every wasted potential, every possible character dynamic, plot point or theme thrown to the wayside has made the fans headcanon a show that doesn't exist in reality. As I said, Hazbin Hotel exists purely on its if and never its when, examples being that the fans were dismayed to discover that Adam as a character purely was as one note as they come, and that his weak smile before his death to Loot was thrown in last minute upon realizing they made him such. I already knew that Adam was a one-note character in this show, but needless to say, he isn't going to be the only victim of this kind of writing. I mean, look at how much potential depth Alistair had back in Season 1, all for that to get dashed away as merely a sour grapes jerk who had a loose interpretation of what being the most powerful sinner in hell meant. You can even see this want of depth through what I can only describe as shipping wars in the fandom of Hazbin Hotel. Characters near and far now being some kind of couple with all the word salad that they'll toss. Vivienne and her defenders take this as some kind of proof that the show is actually much better than critics would have you believe, that so many are willing to drill into the core of this show to pull any oil they can, but I merely see this as people wading through the turd to get to that nugget of a diamond underneath it. And this nugget is becoming harder and harder to stomach through all the turd farming that Hazbin Hotel cannot merely satiate its audience off of it. If this show can only thrive off on the vibes, the music, the character design, and the animation, then it's a show that is quickly hurtling its way off of a cliff. Look at the reception of Arcane Season 2 for instance, a show that also relied on the goodwill of Season 1 on top of its pretty visuals and character design at the detriment of world building, writing, or likewise. This is not a healthy relationship that Vivienne has fostered that fans have to intuit through the milieu of her interviews and random Blue Sky posts, a more realized show than the one they ultimately got, as though the concept of death of the author is completely alien to her. Speaking of, I think another major flaw of the writing of this show is that Vivienne constantly expects that the people who watches are also keeping tabs of whatever she says about it after the fact. Ironically, this was the same problem J.K. Rowling ran into, a person I'm sure Vivienne would hate the comparison, but the moment that you stop putting the pen to the script, all other headcanons are null and void. Vivienne was really insistent that when Charlie chose not to assist her father when he was clearly rattled, that the audience would somehow infer that what he went through was merely a mild inconvenience, when nothing of the scene would you come away with that conclusion. Instead, most of the audience concluded that Charlie, having been deteriorated into a selfish, conceited person, that this would be the exact kind of behavior she would exhibit. Guess you could call that being consistent with your character writing, although again, I'm sure Vivienne wouldn't want that kind of mirror being held against her. Additionally, Vivienne also has a problem with the notion of killing your darlings. Helva Boss suffered this greatly through how much Stolas was given so much undue deference that he crashed the overall premise of that show into yaoi slop, and it certainly continues with the characters Vivienne refuses to meaningfully address or criticize. She will simultaneously put all of this depth and introspection into the dynamic between Vox and Alistair, yet also expect her audience to come away believing that Vox is a loose allegory for Trump, who is a loose allegory for Hitler, who is a loose allegory for whatever fascists they dislike, coming into direct conflict with making one sympathize with Vox's own conceits towards Alistair. What does Vivienne exactly want us to think of him if she simultaneously wants to villainize him greatly, yet clearly shows her fascination of him in high regard? Her interest in a character directly correlates to how much writing they'll actually get, which is why Baxter might as well not have existed, and Alistair got the "I don't want to play with you anymore" treatment after season 1. Worse is what she expects her audience to take from Valentino coming into conflict with her direct association with someone who wrote him as sympathetic, when season 1 already made it clear we shouldn't, yet season 2 we are supposed to view Vox's mistreatment of him as a grave betrayal. She has a way a character will be written and will not budge from it no matter how much the cognitive dissonance gets in the way of it. Seeing as we are delving into the characters, let's go tackle Vox as the central antagonist and figure out exactly what his core motivation is. While throughout season 2 it is constantly lampshaded that he looks up to Alistair for better or worse and tries to emulate what he thinks will disprove Alistair's perception of him, there is a conflict between Vox's own dependency upon others clashing with his need to be self-sufficient in his own success. And this is a conflict that is actualized in the show, but also at times a conflict that can be inconsistent. Primarily with Vox wanting to overtake Heaven, seemingly to gain more power that he already has. I already made the correlation that Vox is similar to Tyrene Calypso in that their cup constantly runneth over to the point of circular logic, although what does work in Vox's favor is that we do see how he is able to amount so much support from throughout. Whether it's his sleazy wordplay, triumphant and fervent grandstanding, or of his literal forced compulsion. Noting his powers and what he's capable of, it is then unfortunate that Vox isn't nearly as clever as the show wants us to make him out to be. He was practically eating out of the hand of Alistair as he shook it. He only was as fortunate as he was to discover Lucifer couldn't smite him, and that the Heaven Council would deliver him more ammunition against them. Most of Vox's own means to get as far as he does is one of the bigger contrivances that it's as if Vox is just constantly falling headfirst into fortuitous situation after the next. If Vox is the kind of person who constantly hungers for fame and success, seemingly this is to supplement something else lacking in himself. Whether his demeanor maintains that attitude, well, we already know how dissonant he was towards meeting Alistair for the first time, but maybe what he truly lacks is a meaningful relationship and thinks that having a gaggle of yes men surrounding him will fill that hole that can't sustain itself. Maybe his resentment towards Alistair was as a result of wanting an opportunity to clean the slate of his deeds in his mortal life, knowing that even surrounded by his lackeys that it did not fill him with contentment, and having Alistair throw that in his face made him reconsider ever showing weakness and vulnerability to people he admires, whether that be Alistair in the present or in his affairs to Valentino. It is then peculiar that the show decided to keep him around instead of being killed by the hubris of the supporters he neglected, like one who only sees the forest for the trees, and this compounds itself with Vox's last line in Season 2, merely a question of whether he still has support, as the V's sigh and nod off. I feel a line like that would be punchier if Vox was saying his last words, that even in the face of having screwed over everyone, that all he cares is approval, empty or otherwise. Ultimately, with all things said, I do appreciate Vox as a more complex villain, as Adam was merely Season 1's unambiguous bad guy for Season 2. Whether there is going to be a deeper discussion about this dynamic going into Season 3, who knows, but needless to say, one of the core themes of this show is of dependency. We've already traced how Vox fits this theme neatly, and there is a dissonant exploration of this theme through Alistair, who is very much insistent that he never relies on other people. Except for when he does so constantly, even in regards to Charlie with the favor he cashes in on, and I figured that him saying that there are no friends in hell to Vox was merely his perspective on things at that time, and not a consistent tenet he held. Maybe Alistair's sudden attitude shift to Rosie is that in all of his proclamation of being his own sinner, he is still tied down by someone else, and Rosie makes it very apparent of such. It would also be consistent with how he reacted to Husk when he brought that up, not that he knows he's indebted to her, but that this is an antithesis of his core value as a character. Now, why Alistair would hedge his bets on signing away most of his autonomy to Vox, on the off chance he will be further liberated out the other end, yeah, he too suffers from the meta of knowing that everyone else in the show would be stupid, that it never once dawned on him that this plan of his would go pear-shaped at any moment. The second and unfortunate major theme explored in this show is outrage, bait, and or wanting to prove oneself. Charlie is chiefly of that exploration, although this feels a little more than Vivienne's own hangups about her critics and her haters projected onto Charlie, given Charlie didn't have these kinds of faults about her from Season 1. As for Charlie meaningfully understanding those mistakes, while she expresses doubt and sorrow about what she did, this gets completely swept by Vaggie, who just wants to dig into her vaggie as though resolved. Even when Charlie proclaims that people have seen where she failed, this feels a little more than her failure to prove to Hell correct, less so than failure of her attitude and pride getting in the way of the values she asserts, and seems even her, so to speak, concern of Hell was a secondary motive to ultimately prove she can hold a candle to Lilith. Again, this was something I had theorized in my summary of Season 1, however, I had also expected that Charlie would have navigated this with more deftness if that was the intention, and if not, was not something Season 2 would accentuate. And with Charlie having relinquished authority of the hotel onto Vaggie after showing little to no concern of the residents leaving the hotel through her mistakes, it's more than evident that this was not ever a core value she was going to carry. Nor was the show going to, as it becomes more and more apparent that the pilot is a completely different alien to what the show serialized by Amazon became. It becomes harder and harder to appreciate the notion that Hazbin Hotel carried water for future indie animation studios if where it came from watered down its own writing, premise, and characterization as a result. Plenty of people who defend the show even tried to claim that the pilot for Hazbin Hotel was lapsed in much, and that the show provides much more of what Vivienne was going for, which of course it would because there is simply more of it. But again, more does not mean better, and too much of a good thing will inevitably mar what brought people to this show in the first place. Certainly did for me, as I had no preconceived notions about Vivienne going into the pilot, got enchanted by it, that I explored her other avenues, and then over time, lost favor and faith in how much her own ego and connections blinded the broader problems with the way these shows are written. In a way, Vivienne is less of an analog of Charlie she projects onto, but more so the very antagonist she has typefaced as the MAGA of cartoon shows. never appreciative of the little victories come her way, always expects everyone to kiss her ass, navel wide in scope but thin in depth, and in all the self-destruction and collateral she causes, still is linearly focused in approval. It will only be a matter of time until this gravy train will lose traction, and by then, there will be no one to save Vivienne from the calamity she's caused. And that was it for the analysis. Of course, when it comes to final kudos like this, you'll be curious as to what I have in store next. Well, this series rolled into 2026, so naturally, my yearly mainline Borderlands excursion should also go underway, and I do have plans to cover, to my own detriment, new Tales from the Borderlands, as I'm still wary about buying into Borderlands 4 with the way Randy Pitchford handled it as well as Vivienne does when it comes to criticism, and I do have a sneaking suspicion that perhaps certain things from New Tales will return into Borderlands 4. However, I do have plans to cover another movie, and not just any movie, but a movie that I will be absolutely gushing over to contrast my usually more critical and often negative assessment of things. I don't want to spill the beans on that yet, but it's definitely something that has come to mind now, having really gone in the handle of doing these long-form breakdowns. For the time being, I will be doing the usual spur of odd architecture and shorter form vids in the interim as always. Of course, citations for all videos used will be in the pinned comment of this video, and if you liked my content such you want to financially compensate, I do have a Patreon with a minimum and maximum donation of $5. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown as all rest, whatever shorter form videos I have made, and hope to see you in future videos.